Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I'm coming to you from my home. Not this. This isn't my home. I know this looks a little different from the videos that you're used to seeing where they're filmed in the Microjig shop, but I, like many of you, am working from home, and I'm gonna continue working from home until this whole COVID thing gets sorted out. But the thing is, I don't have a shop at home. All I have is this 10 by 12 shed. And if you follow us on Instagram, you may have seen some posts over the last few months about this cart I built to make the most out of this 120 square feet and make it an actual functional workspace. And now I'm happy to say it's finally done. Welcome to Tiny Shop with Morgan Hopp. I started by designing a 3D model based on the space available and the tools I wanted to incorporate into it. The finished project's a little different from the initial design, but it's pretty close. I built a 2x4 frame to attach casters and then a plywood floor. On top of that, I added various cabinets and compartments for the tools I incorporated, drawers for storage, and a dust collection system underneath. The top needed to serve as my table saw outfeed, my router tabletop, joiner bed extension, and assembly surface. So I had to be strategic about where I placed the tools in relation to each other to get the most out of the surface. Since the table saw is a job site saw with an extendable wing, the fence was limited to the saw's capacity. I needed about twice that capacity, so I fabricated my own fence rails and bought an aftermarket T-square style fence. I also got a digital fence scale for Christmas a few years ago and I haven't been able to use it yet, so it seemed like a good opportunity. The router sits right behind the table saw, so I couldn't have a permanent fence sitting there getting in the way of operating the table saw. So I decided to put some zero-play miter stops on this Inker fence and secure it to the miter slots on the table saw. This fence is indexed and it has its own scale. So all I need to do to position the fence and get an accurate measurement is use this setup jig I made a while back. I know that the center of this hole is exactly 4 inches from this edge, so I just lock the fence measurement at 4 inches, bump it up to the edge of the jig, and lock it down with the miter stops. If I need more capacity, all I have to do is loosen the miter stops, scoot the whole thing further back in the miter slot. Another space-saving feature is the joiner planer combo. Stuff to adjust the joiner planer combo is all in the drawer right beneath it. And the jack to move it between the joiner and planer position sits on a shelf just above the drawer. I also added these little leveling screws to fine-tune the height. This is all wood, so it's gonna swell and warp and it may not be level tomorrow, but this allows me to adjust it. It came with a fence, but it attached the joiner with screws, which seemed like it'd be burdensome to put on and take off. I solved that problem with my mag fence and a recessed steel bar. So whenever I need to use the joiner, I can pop the fence on and off in just a few seconds. And it won't interfere with operating any of the other tools. I put a recessed power strip and dust port right in the middle of the top so I wouldn't have to unplug anything or run extra extension cord where I need to use any tool other than the 3 that are built in. It's all hooked up to the same auto switch and dust collection system, so whenever I need to sand or route something, it's pretty much plug and play. I needed the storage to be as versatile as possible because of the crazy space restrictions. Anything that I need to access and use quickly is kept right next to the tool I'd need to use it on. I have my tall fence, joining sled, tapering jig right here behind the table saw. Blade storage and most of my table saw jigs are right by the table saw. Router bits are all stored in the router cabinet. I also keep some sanding drums in there so I can use the router as a spindle sander. I added a fold down extension here with a grid of dovetail tracks. When it's folded down, it gives me a 90-degree corner for assembly. I also fold it out when I need to use this flattening jig. It's just your basic router flattening jig, but it attaches with dovetail hardware and breaks down when it's not in use. It's also self-centering by having a bullnose profile on the rails and a V-groove on the router sled. It's just simple gravity that centers this whole thing, and with the opposing profiles, I have very little friction. Originally, I was planning on putting traditional hinges on these cabinet doors, but I made this thing so big that it barely rolls in and out of the shed. So since there's not enough clearance to swing open, I decided to attach the doors with magnets, so they can come on and off and actually have the doors double as sleds. I already have table saw sleds coming out of the ears, so I figured I'd set these up as permanent fixtures for processes that I do pretty regularly. This one's a cross-cut sled with a permanent fence fixed at 90 degrees. Will I ever use it? I don't know, maybe. All the ancillary tools stored in here are mounted on their own plywood base, and they can easily be secured at the top with dovetail clamps and put back on the shelf when I'm done. That's about all for the cart. I call it a most-in-one cart because it's not really all-in-one. There's a few tools that I just left stationary in the shed. Figured that would be more realistic than trying to get everything on there. The bandsaw, obviously way too big for the cart, and the miter saw because I wanted to keep the fence extension permanently set up. I put up these French cleat walls to store tools so I can move them around as needed. I've got some hand tools here, planes, chisels, all that good stuff. I had this little 3D printer in here I use for prototyping jig ideas. It has sensitive parts, so it lives in this plexiglass case to protect it from dust. Hey Alexa, what's 5/16 as a decimal?
5/16 as a decimal is 0.3125.
That's my assistant. She's super helpful. Is this an ideal workspace for someone who's almost 6.5 feet tall? No. But with just 120 square feet in here and the cart, it's surprisingly functional thanks to the MATCHFIT system. Especially for assembly and hand tool work, the dovetail clamps and hardware will make it all possible. So if you're working with limited space, that's the way to go. Well, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. And as always, if this sparks some imagination and you want to incorporate some of these ideas into your workspace, we'd love to see it. Be sure to tag us on social media and show us what you're working on. Thanks for watching.